Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. We're going to bring Julian Edelman in just a few minutes. And when he gets here, we're going to talk Bill Belichick, the direction of the Patriots franchise, what the Patriots need to do to get back, and what do they need at the quarterback position. Before we get to Jules, though, I want to go deep on the quarterback position and what the Patriots need with Phil Perry, because, Phil, you pointed out last week that quote from Ryan Fitzpatrick. Fitz said, as the Patriots play in the Pittsburgh Steelers, Mac Jones is definitely broken. Mentally, emotionally, he's broken. You know, I look to a few similar examples of first-round quarterbacks that have gone through the struggles. Tua Tagovailoa, who I was with Brian Flores, using the same New England way. He was broken by Brian Flores. And what happens? Mike McDaniel comes in, he restores his confidence, he gets it back, and now he's an MVP candidate. Phil, you mentioned that quote from Ryan Fitzpatrick as an entree into a couple of different things. The first being, with the Patriots owning a top 3 pick, how important is the care and feeding of the new quarterback going to be?
Well, I think it's everything in some ways, because you can't survive in today's game as a head coach, as a general manager, as an overall football organization, if you don't allow, especially a young player that you've invested highly in at that position, to succeed. If he doesn't succeed, you don't succeed, and everybody's looking for jobs soon. So when it comes to that example, that particular example, I find it interesting, because everything I know and have reported about Brian Flores' time in Miami is that he was tough, and he wasn't Bill Belichick necessarily, but he might have even been harder to work with in some ways. Coach to coach, coach to player. There was a lot of combativeness, I think it's fair to say, that existed within those walls. And for young players in particular, Tom, these aren't children of the 70s and 80s and 90s or even early 2000s. These are guys that are closer in age to, to use a New England example, Rob Gronkowski, who was clearly not happy here and might have been emotionally broken himself by the end of his tenure here in New England. These guys are much younger than Gronk. You can't treat them the same way you treated Gronk or Brady or Vrabel or Lawrence Taylor. And so that, to me, is going to be key for whoever is next here in positions of power, is trying to understand who the quarterback is as a person and tap into what makes them go. Odds are, given that player's age, that he's going to need a little bit more uplifting than tearing down and then being built back up.
And I don't think necessarily it has to be a generational thing. I think that a player like, for instance, Bailey Zappi, might be a little bit more of an underdog, used to resiliency and having to battle back. I mean, the guy got cut. The guy's been cut and rendered third string and still is able to perform. So regardless of the limitations that I might see physically for Bailey Zappi, there is a pretty strong constitution that he has built up over the course of time that I'm not saying Mac Jones doesn't have, but I do think that Mac Jones is broken a little bit. I think we can all agree on that. Here's what Mike Lombardi said on the GM Shuffle podcast in January of 2022, speaking about Tua. And this is before Tua had really, gone off. This is after the 2021 season. At that point, Miami was moving on from Flores and trying to pick their new coach. And this is what Mike Lombardi had to say. If you're really honest, are you going to sit there as a candidate and say, I can build a team around Tua? Because that's what Stephen Ross wants to hear. That's what Brian Flores wouldn't say. We've seen all the conversations that Flores had with Tua, where Flores told Tua at halftime of the Tennessee game, and this has all been reported. I don't think Flores was shy about telling Tua, hey, I should have picked Mac Jones. I don't think he was shy about telling him that. In fact, I know that he wasn't. I remember there was some commentary between the head coach and Tua during the season, and I wouldn't reveal what the conversation was. Well, the conversation was, hey, if I'd have known you were going to be this bad, I would have picked Mac Jones. So the next guy coming in, Flores felt that way. How is the next guy going to come in and fix it? You say, well, they're going to run an offense that suits what Tua does. And then he goes on a little bit more. But the upshot is Brian Flores brought a New England sensibility to coaching the quarterback in Miami. Josh McDaniels brought his New England sensibility to coaching David Carr and Derek Carr, and, coaching Jimmy. And the sensibilities to Jay Cutler were brought by Josh. This is so vital. Brady was an outlier because of everything he had been through before he got here. He was already beaten down and unbelievably resilient. And I'll be honest, Drew Bledsoe was a pretty tough guy physically. And he had the scars from Parcells in 93, 94, 95, and 96. But by the time Bill Belichick came in and Charlie Weiss, Drew tried hard to assimilate to what they wanted, but he was pretty fatigued. He was pretty broken mentally himself to be rebooting. So the question then becomes, who do the Patriots want? Do they want Bill O'Brien to be the guy in charge? Do they look at Mac as rehabilitatable at all? Or is the well so poisoned here just in the geography that it makes it impossible for Mac to be rehabbed and he's just a cautionary tale?
I think it's more than geography, because this team is going to have similarities from 2023 to 2024 and beyond. You can't start fresh. You can't start from scratch. You can't wipe the slate clean. There are going to be faces in that locker room that Mac Jones is familiar with, probably coaches on the coaching staff that he's very familiar with. And so for those reasons, my guess is he is going to end up somewhere else. And I think whoever it is, whether it's Bill O'Brien, and I think he could do it because he's worked with enough young players. He's worked with college freshmen. Right. Mm-hmm. He worked with Deshaun Watson as a young player and helped him become a great player in Houston. Eventually, one of the better quarterbacks in football down there. And so he has the ability to do that. And I would trust him to do that, quite honestly. But there is, it's a great term that you use. There is a great level of importance that needs to be placed on the care and feeding of these players, because it is different. Times have changed. I think you're right. There probably are some old school guys. Like I look at Jabril Peppers. That's an old school guy. Okay. Mm-hmm. He's younger than Gronk. He's younger than Brady, but that's a resilient cat who's been through a lot in life. And we're seeing that, I think, in his performance this year. He hasn't been shaken by the fact that they haven't been very good or that he's coming off of injury or anything like that. But I always go back to, Tom, a conversation that I had with Dr. Bob Troutwine, who is the creator of the TAP, which is this psychological test that thousands of prospective NFL players at the combine have been given every single year. Bill Belichick was one of the early adopters of the TAP back in the 90s when he was with the Browns. And what he told me was, when he initially created this test and you were getting guys who were born in the 70s, they didn't test for work ethic. They didn't test really for work habits, because everyone was assumed to be at the baseline level that you needed to be a professional athlete. To even get to the point of taking that test, you had to have such great work ethic. You had to be, in some ways, such a blue collar person that it was a waste of your time to almost test for that stuff. Mm-hmm. But now he says it's one of the most important things they test for, because it ain't that way anymore. And so I just think that you're right. I don't want to paint with a broad brush and say that nobody's resilient, because that's not true. But I just think, in general, the modern player needs something a little different. I think Mike McDaniel is representative of that, of giving them a little something different. I think Dan Campbell, who's very different from Mike McDaniel, but in his own way, I don't think is beating these players down the way one of his mentors, Bill Parcells, might have back in the day.
Yeah, let's listen to a bit from Mike McDaniel while on the plane to go see Tua. It's a conversation between McDaniel and Tua just after the hiring of McDaniel, and listen to the bedside manner.
There he is, man. I just had to get on with you real quick. We're going to have an extensive professional relationship, my man. One thing I know about you is you have the ambition to be great. My job is to coach you to get all that greatness out of you. And it's going to be fun, man. It's going to be work, but I know you're not afraid of that. So this is an awesome day for me. And I'm damn sure going to make sure that when you look back on this day, you're going to be like, damn, that was one of the best days of my career, too. It's on, bro. If you don't have eye black at home, you better go get some eye black, because we're going. It'll be outstanding, dude. I'm happy for you. I'm happy for myself. And I think the Dolphins fans should be happy as well.
It's funny. I think the knee jerk for us is to say, at least at my age, having grown up, well, these kids just aren't tough enough. Well, do we maybe look at the teacher and say, that's not the most effective way to teach, though? Because, do you really have to kneecap somebody emotionally to get the best out of them? Well, I know that there's a million ways to get results. I know that because I've just been on the planet. Not that I get results from people, but shame is a motivator. Humiliation can be a motivator because, spare the rod, spoil the child. The more that people realize that, Pavlov's dog, no matter what you want to use as a reward for good play, if the reward is the absence of verbal abuse, shame and humiliation, if that's its own reward, well, then, and that player responds to it, well, then you got to do it. I'm not saying you have to put him in a cage in the corner and, throw sticks at him in a fire hose, but whatever it takes to reach that player is necessary. And it's not going to be the same from Mac Jones to Bailey Zappi. And I do think that Mac Jones was very tough mentally and physically when he got here. I think that he just tried to be too resourceful in trying to fix his thing. And by then he had pissed off the oldest of old school coaches. He had pissed off basically an offshoot of General Patton. I mean, it's not, I'm not making any sense.
No, you are. We're talking about bedside manner, Tom. And I think that matters. But maybe, are we giving it too much weight? Because I'm thinking now of Tua Tagovailoa, and it's great for Mike McDaniel to say all those things that he said to him on the plane there. And it's great for him to publicly say that he's the most accurate quarterback he's ever seen and pump him up in that way to try to get the best out of him. But if they don't get Tyreek Hill for Tua Tagovailoa, if they don't give him Jalen Waddle in the same offensive huddle, does it matter? Because he might still struggle. And you can throw him all the bouquets that you'd like. And at the end of the day, he might still just be sort of an average quarterback unless he's surrounded by these people. So it's a combination of things, as it always is at every position, but this is the most important one. So there has to be some level of understanding of the player's makeup when they come in, because I've got a feeling Caleb Williams, his makeup is going to be a little bit different than Tom Brady's, for example. But if you give Caleb Williams, N'Keal Harry and Mohamed Sanu, the results aren't going to be very good, even if you are giving him everything he needs emotionally, spiritually, etc. You have to have the on the field stuff to support the guy, as well as the behind the scenes bedside manner that can help him reach his full potential.
You look at Bill Belichick's Patriots career in 2000, the Patriots went 5-11, and I'm sure that Drew Bledsoe's feelings were very similar then to Mac Jones. What am I supposed to do here? First of all, they tie my hands. I can't do anything. I'm not really getting great protection. Nobody's getting open. And I'm supposed to throw it 4 feet every time to Kevin Falk. But he sucked it up and he made it through. Mac was trying to do the same thing, but he wasn't as talented physically as Drew. So he couldn't even get them to 5 wins. And it was probably I can't even say it was more talented in 2000. No, it wasn't a more talented team. Better offensive line, but not really at the running backs. Anyway.
Would you, let me ask you this.
Bledsoe got flushed and Mac's about to get flushed.
Do you think makeup can be altered as a pro? Meaning if you're looking at Drake May and Caleb Williams and even Jaden Daniels, and you look at them all physically, you say, physically, they're different, but they all have NFL skill sets. There's no question, right? There were questions about that stuff with Mac Jones before he was even drafted. But as you're trying to assess their makeup, whether it's through the tap or just the general interview process or whatever, interviews with others, you're talking to the cafeteria people at these different colleges, you're talking to their strength coaches, you're talking to the video people that work with the football program. What is this guy really like? What makes him tick? If you're the general manager of the Patriots, whoever that is next, do you overlook some of that if you don't love it all in favor of the plus skill set and say, well, we could teach him, we can get more out of him? Or are you willing to take less physically if it means you're getting the best makeup that you think fits your program?
Well, I think that the Patriots, when they bought on Mac, probably presumed that they were getting a kid who was very mentally and physically resilient, definitely mentally resilient because of what he overcame at Alabama. But he gets served such a poop sandwich and felt so, I think, isolated by the coaching staff, certainly by Bill, that it's basically how much adversity and abuse is overstating it, but how much adversity can the player withstand before he can't play like himself, before he no longer responds? What are the environmental dynamics that enter into the player's performance that you can control? Hugs, pats on the back, cupcakes with a candle in the middle for a good practice on a Thursday, simple conversation, not being told that, yeah, you can play in this league, not having the opportunity to say he's a good player, resisted publicly. I mean, those go further than the candle and the cupcake, I'm sure. But Bill would not extend those because, again, generationally, Bill's dad played in the NFL in the 30s. Bill was born in the 50s. Bill grew up around the Naval Academy in the 60s with the toughest of the tough mentally. Bill coached next to Parcells. Bill created a team where the concept was the strength of the wolf is in the pack. You never deviate. You live with the pack. I'm the leader of the pack. If I see any of you little cubs running around, the shit's going to hit the fan. And Mac, I think, could ride with that for a long time, but eventually broke.
Well, and I look at it,
fascinating conversation.
It is, and I think spinning it forward remains fascinating because you have to, this player, whoever they take, say they do take a quarterback at the top of the draft, he's not being drafted in a vacuum. He's not being drafted to work one-on-one with a head coach or an offensive coordinator who needs to treat the player in a certain way. He's getting drafted to a team, and this particular team isn't very well set up right now to support a young quarterback. So do you just eschew it entirely and just say, we'll figure out the quarterback, but there's no such thing as a young player that can succeed in our system the way we have it right now with our offensive line and our receivers? It's not built that way at the present. Or do you say, well, if we get the right guy with the right makeup, he could shoulder the burden of being the Patriots quarterback in 2024, even if there are questions in front of him protecting him, even if there are questions along the boundary as he's trying to find somebody downfield to throw to. That part of it, to me, makes the makeup question at this position the most important one, because you'll have the opportunity to take a physically talented guy. But if you take him now, he has to be able to withstand a lot of adversity. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to peg that in the pre-draft process because everybody's picture is incomplete to a degree. And you can never be totally sure of what you're getting.
And that's why it's hard to peg it in the coach too. Look, Bill's not going to change who he is right now. I mean, he's rebuilt teams and done a good job of it, but I just think that Gerard Mayo would be a much better fit. And Gerard's tough, very tough. He grew up with his grandfather was in the military. He grew up with definitely a military sensibility. He's a guy who is constantly trying to improve himself. He'll get up at 5 a.m. and take an ice shower every day just for the hell of it. So he's going to have high expectations too. But I think that his emotional IQ is way higher than Bill's, if we're just going to say it plainly. His emotional IQ for dealing with other people is much higher than Bill's. And I think that's going to be the biggest part of it. You can be tough as hell and you can be driven. And I think that Mayo would be that, but his emotional IQ and understanding what the player might need is better with Gerard Mayo and probably with Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think the O'Brien is interesting to me because I still think of him as pretty old school personality wise, but I would assume based on the breadth of work that is on his resume, working with younger quarterbacks, that he's actually pretty well suited to be able to handle that sort of thing. Is he, Is he Mike McDaniel? No. I mean, he's approaching it from a much, much different perspective, but it's going to be really important that whoever is in the quarterback's ear the most has this thing in mind, because the last thing you want is what's happened with Mac Jones. He is the cautionary tale. If we don't do enough around him, if we don't handle him a certain way off the field, if you get a broken quarterback, then everybody's screwed. So, you may have to put whatever your preconceived notions of what makes a good coach or what makes a successful player in terms of the coaching that player needs. You may need to change that to agree. You just need to be open to changing that. And I think Bill Belichick has been open to adapting in a variety of different ways, but this is one that those personal interactions that you're talking about, I think is one where, a little bit more adaptation probably would have served the team.
There's a lot of give and take in any marriage, as we both know. There's a lot of meeting people halfway and understanding what the other person needs, whether it's a made bed and a clean sink when they come home. Because those things, what are you talking about, Tom? Why do you have to go off on these tangents? People have things to do. You got to find the right partner, and you got to make sure that the partners work well together. Sorry, folks. Tuesdays are bad for me. I get the quick slants. I get the do that plan. I get the pod. Phil takes Tuesday off. I grab him in, and then I had some technical difficulties. And then I got EEI at noon. We got a conference call. We're going to have Edelman at 2:30. So this portion of the pod right now is prior to Edelman. So half my mind is saying, well, how am I going to lead into Jules? I got a golf lesson at Golf Tech at 3:30. I'm going to work on posture and how far I am from. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just, I'm not going to get to talk to Julian, and he's an old school mindset kind of person.
I know, that's why
based on how he was raised, and it is great, but he's of a different generation too. And I wonder if the receiver position, Tom, this is almost as crucial, if not more. I mean, you could say the receiver position and their struggles to find real players there since Julian Edelman, drafted in 2009, has been the downfall of the franchise. I mean, it's been that bad between Antonio Brown and Mohamed Sanu and N'Keal Harry and Tyquan Thornton. And it's just, if they had just hit on a couple of these guys at some point, things might look a lot different. But again, I think they remove a lot of the most talented players at the position from the equation altogether, because they might feel as though, well, I don't know if this guy's going to be able to take our coaching. Can this player take hard coaching? I know they factor that into their pre-draft scouting process. And if they don't think he can, he might be the best receiver in the draft class. They might not be willing to take him. So I'd be fascinated to hear Julian Edelman, as somebody who's worked closely with a lot of young receivers, how he feels they handle the scene in Foxborough.
It's so funny because, we have the great lament right now that is ongoing and worth having because of production. Well, how could you pass on George Pickens and take Tyquan Thornton? And it's a weekly situation in Pittsburgh right now, the care and feeding of the overly emotional George Pickens for Mike Tomlin. Tomlin is sick of it. And the other kid, what's his name? Deontay Johnson. The other receiver. Yeah, Deontay Johnson. So it's emotional maturity at all these positions. And how will that emotional maturity and, hey, I didn't succeed here. Hey, my teammate let me down. Hey, my coach yelled at me. Hey, it wasn't my fault, but I'm still getting yelled at. How do I respond? I'm not the most emotionally mature guy in the world. Okay. So that's why, well, you're better than me. You get worse as you get older. But I think it's a fascinating conversation because I do think that people's emotional maturity and how they deal with adversity and how many people they take with them and what's their quit level. What makes them quit? Because I think Mac finally threw his hands up. Look, Zach Wilson, he threw his hands up, came out this past weekend, played his ass off. He didn't quit, but he quit giving a shit. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers Stay Hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, I call them totals, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/NSBO and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. 21 plus and present in Mass. Hope is here. First online real money wager only. $5 pregame moneyline wager required. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling helpline, mass.org, or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. Play it smart from the start. GameSenseMA.com or call 1-800-GAM-1234. All right, now it's time for Jules, and it is important to note how successful our guy has been since retiring from the NFL. Here he was on Fox the other day with a facial recognized Rob Gronkowski. They were talking about Bill Belichick's future in the wake of the win over the Steelers last Thursday.
But I think Coach Belichick, for his future, I mean, that gives him a confidence boost. That gives him, the ability to say, hey, look, we still have it. The guys still want to play ball. And he's going to continue into next year.
He'll stay in New England. Mm-hmm. He's not going anywhere.
No, he's not.
Jules?
Look, okay.
Watch what you say.
Marriages.
Watch what you say, Jules.
Long marriages are tough.
Short marriages are tough for me. I'll bail you out of this one.
No, it's gonna be interesting. I really, honestly think only 3 people know what's gonna happen next year: Bill, RKK, and Jonathan. And I don't think they're gonna address it until the season's over. So okay. I think that's where we're at.
Now, before we bring Jules in, it's important for you guys to all know that season 2 of Games with Names has dropped. That is Julian's podcast. The first episode with Gronk is out. It's absolutely friggin' hysterical. So check that out on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Tremendous stuff. And as you may or may not know, Julian and I did a book in 2017. It was called Relentless. It's a memoir of Julian's career in the NFL to that point. And one of the great things about that book was spending so much time with his dad, Frank Edelman, out in Redwood City, California. And Frank, by his own admission, you can find it in the book, was a legendarily hard-assed dad/coach. And as he said to me one day as we were driving away from a Babe Ruth field in which he and Julian came to blows after Frank hit Julian with a pitch, Tommy, I didn't do a good job. I could have done a better job with Jules. I wish I could have it, a chance to do some of those things different. Frank, one of our most loyal listeners, we love you very much. You did great. No handbook. That's what we talked about. There is no handbook. Now here's Jules. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's the legend himself, Julian Edelman. Jules, and you are in the Games with Names studio right there, right?
This is the Games Name Studio here in LA. Had to bring Boston West. I know it's a little weird, but yeah, we're here. We're here.
We're here. Is it distressing to see your alma mater, which I think the Patriots kind of are for you, struggling the way they are?
Yeah, it is. It's a little it's sad, because the kind of work they're putting in, they're not working any less. And the guys some of the guys I played with are still there, the Slates, the Andrews, the Cardonias, and it's tough. But this is a product of what you see when you miss out on a first round draft quarterback. Okay, let's call a spade here.
Yeah, and you're all in on the Patriots getting the best possible pick. You mentioned the same. That being the case, would you take a quarterback with somebody in the top 3, or would you trade down?
You got to probably get a quarterback. If they fall in love with one of these guys, you got to get someone.
All right.
It was too exciting. Got to.
Which brings me to this question. Because when we look at Mac, he's kind of broken. Ryan Fitzpatrick the other night on Prime He said, look, I look at Mac Jones and he's broken. He's broken emotionally. He's broken mentally. And I watched the same thing happen with Brian Flores. He was broken. You brought in a coach that worked better with him, and it made things work for Tua because it was the kind of coaching you needed. When it comes to coaching, and you were a hardly coached guy by both your dad, by Bill, by everybody, how hard is too hard when it comes to coaching?
That question's probably changed. That how you rank that a lot in these last 10 years with the newer player, and I'm sure that meter changes to go softer and softer every 10 years. Like the guys that were getting coached when I got in the league hard was probably a different way than the guys that are getting coached hard now. So I think how hard is too hard. I mean, you got to know your players. You got to know your players, and if your player needs to be coached hard, and he's that kind of guy, you got to coach him hard. If not, ultimately you're trying to do what's best to get the best out of the player. So I think that's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question because guys like you and Tom, for some reason, you people from that San Mateo area could take the hard coaching. I don't think that Gronk really embraced it the same way that you guys did. Or maybe Amendola to an extent, too. I think everybody can take it to a point, but their point of, this kind of sucks was a little lower than many players have gone through.
Yeah. I mean, guys are different. Good coaches coach guys differently, other players differently.
How much did the Patriots let Mac down, do you think, Jules?
I mean, last year was definitely a tough situation. When you don't really have a plan with the offense, with special teams coordinator, defensive coordinator doing that. But I think of it like this, and if you're a guy, you figure your way out how to make plays. If you're a guy in this league, yeah, you do that. I mean, look at Justin Herbert. I mean, he didn't have, and I know this year's particularly worse than what he's been having, but I mean, the guy found out he was playing and starting his first game 20 minutes before the game. And he went in and became productive and built something. And he's made plays. And you've seen confidence when you shouldn't probably have had the confidence. So I don't know. If you're a guy, you make plays. Have the Patriots let Mac down? I'm sure they have, but they haven't hit on any of their offensive players. And they tried to spend some money on the offensive side of the ball a few years ago. Some of the guys worked out, some didn't. But he's definitely, it's a tough situation. It's a tough situation. I feel bad for the kid.
Yeah.
It was tough, but he didn't help himself with how he acted in a lot of ways. And you can't follow up a guy that was notoriously known to take hard coaching, who did it for 20 years. And there was friction here or there or whatever, but we never really heard about it out of Tom's camp. You never heard about it. You may have, there could have been some whatever leak, this, that, but it was all kosher at work, and they were able to compartmentalize. People were able to play. When you go out and you're shushing up the coaches, you got the ball, and I don't want to sound like an old guy, like an old school guy, but that's not what you want to see from a starting quarterback. A guy grabbing dudes ball sacks, kicking a guy. That's not going to help you when these kind of conversations come up. And I thought about that anytime I played or when I was working. I want to give them a reason when my production slips or anything to get me out of here. That's why I'm going to be the first one in. I'm going to take the coaching. I'll be the last one to leave. That's kind of how I figured it. So, I don't think he helped himself with a lot of the things that, he's done. And you never know. He could have a career that I just don't think it's going to happen in New England. I think he's definitely broken. Maybe he goes on and finds gets another shot somewhere, but sometimes you got to toughen it out.
It's funny when you point that out, and I wonder how much as a second-year player. See, Tom could bark at the sidelines or say something to Josh or flip out on Billy O'Brien. That's after 3 Super Bowls. That's after, in 2011 when he lost his mind in Washington. It's a totally different situation. And I wonder how much Mac felt emboldened by the things that Bill said prior to last year's training camp about this kid's made such improvement. He started from a better spot. He's been dramatic. And he said, hey, Mac, this could be a tough year for you here. So just bear with me, which may have emboldened Mac to feel, okay, you know what? If I don't like something, I'm going to say it, which you can't do as a second-year player. In your experience, once Bill's out on you, does he kind of stay out? Because it felt like there was a point at which Bill said, yeah, it's not working with this kid.
Yeah, I mean, I just always, if Bill was out on you, you're usually not there. I mean, during my stint there. So it's hard to compare on the experiences that I've had with him. And this is a completely different situation. Since quarterback position, and there's probably way more politics behind it than I ever will, because I don't know that situation. So, but it is, when coaches are out on you, it is tough.
Is it hard for you to listen to the scrutiny and second guessing? Look, I know Frank can't stand it. Your dad will call me once a month and say, will you cut it out with Bill? Will you just leave him alone? But is it hard to hear the scrutiny and the second guessing?
It's not, because I can actually remember a time when we were getting something and we were talking about the media. And I remember Bill saying, like, they're just out here to get a story, his whole Bill thing. And he goes, there's going to be a time where they're going to turn on me too, or that's just, so he put it in my head. So I guess I'm not surprised. And this is a production business, and he knows that. He knows, he's been around. He's been in this probably situation back when he was in Cleveland. So he knows what he's dealing with, and it's not easy, especially with the success that we've amounted here in New England for a long time. It's just so new.
It is.
What people don't understand is you lose 2 all-time great. You lose the greatest football player ever play. You lose the greatest tight end ever play. You lose the greatest offensive line coach. You lose Scotty O'Brien, who's one of the most gifted roster guys from Bill's mouth that I've heard on how to construct a team. You lose the Ivan Fears of the world, who the Ernies, so it's tough. This is a learning experience, I think, for everyone in this situation.
It is. There's been unbelievable attrition on the field, and Caserio, go back to Jason Light, Monty Austinfort. I mean, I threw at Jason Light, he's years ago, but and you throw in the coordinators, Flores, Patricia, Judge goes as your special teams coach. And then, of course, Josh. So there's an unbelievable amount of attrition. But I think when you look at, okay, who are the coaches who are in place now taking care of these positions? Are they the right guys? Did Bill hire the right guys? Did he cultivate the right guys? And then you look at the players that get hired, and are they developing? And I think that's what's a little more distressing. You mentioned the first-round draft pick. Any of the draft picks, if they get here and they don't get better, then you have to go, how come they're not getting better? And I think that's where the rubber meets the road for Bill in terms of the scrutiny.
Yeah.
Good point.
That's a great point by you, Tony. No, it's tough to watch for all parties. It's tough watching Mr. Kraft. It's tough watching Bill. It's tough watching Mac. I feel bad. He's a young football player that lost his confidence. And on a field, on a gridiron where you're dealing with the most confident men, probably in their area, that have grown up thinking they're the baddest dude in the world since they were 2 years old, and rightfully probably they are the baddest. You know what I mean? So when you lose that, it's tough. So this is a tough situation for everyone, and it'll be interesting to see how they handle it.
Do you think it would be disloyal if Robert says, hey, we're going to have to go in a different direction? Do you think Bill would perceive it as such? Not ungrateful, I guess.
I would say, I would say that they'd have to have a hard conversation at the end of the year, and lay everything out, I don't think I think you gotta see what coach kind of wants, and maybe coach doesn't want to be there anymore. I mean, maybe he does. If he doesn't, I think he's earned that to be part of that decision. But I mean, also, Mr. Kraft could lay out, hey, look at this, look at the draft picks, look at what's going on, look at these last couple seasons, and Bill's done that. Bill's done that to everyone. Bill's done that to me. When I went in there for a contract, hey, you're not as fast, you're 32, you're coming off an ACL. Why should I pay you that? Like, there's going to have to be a hard conversation. And I think Bill would understand that. He's the one who says this is a production business. So I think if they act like grown-ups and they handle it, I think there's a way to be handled. I don't know what it is. I only think three people really can kind of know or answer that right now. And that's Jonathan, Mr. RKK, and Bill. I don't think anyone else knows what's going on.
Do you believe there's a decision that's already been made? I mean, when you look at what Robert has said, look, hey, to the season ticket holders, we expect success preseason or at the owners' meetings. We want to be in the playoffs. We expect to be in the postseason. There's a point at which you look at all the breadcrumbs, and then you look at 3 and 10 and you go, it's an inescapable, inevitable conclusion.
He also was talking about loyalty to, his businesses and all of the stuff on game day a couple of days ago in Annapolis. So I don't know. There's a whole lot of that stuff. I'm not in the reading the minds business. I'm in, I'm in the business of, I guess I'm analyzing things.
You're in everything now.
Something like that.
Hey, I do want to ask you this, because as we continue to kind of, we're buzzards on a wire here. We're buzzards circling in the media while we watch this stuff. And you do lose the human side of things. But I want to ask you this, as someone who never said one discouraging word about Bill or the Patriots after leaving, and a lot of guys aired their grievances and patched things up, but you never had anything to say. What did Bill Belichick mean to you as a football player and as a guy and going forward?
Ultimately, I feel that he gave me my opportunity. And that's, as a guy that was in my situation, there was a lot of things that were stacked against me, and this guy, he drafted me and he helped develop me, and I saw by example of how you should prepare in the National Football League. So I love Bill. Yeah, he's an asshole. I don't know if you can swear on this, but yeah, he's tough. But that's not everything you do is going to be easy and sunshine and rainbows. I didn't love studying for tests, but you still had to kind of do it to go do a test. I hate taking cough syrup, but it helps the cough go away. There's all these things that you could put in the same kind of parallel with it, that you hate doing things, and there's always hard things. You're going to get bitched at, you're going to get yelled at, but usually, it's for a constructive reason. And I felt like, I needed that. So I appreciate Coach. I love Coach. Yeah. Is he an a-hole? Yeah, he's an asshole sometimes, but those are football coaches. Football, that's how it was when I was a kid. That's what football coaches were. It was more of, there's the coach and then there's the players, and you're going to coach's way. And so I appreciated that. I needed that.
We come full circle back to, to a degree, is Bill's style and way of doing things still relevant? Or does the modern player, generally speaking, need a little bit more tender love and care? You know what? I'm not going to make you answer that. We'll have you back on the next one. You want to answer it? Go.
Maybe I don't know. I don't know. I'm not in the locker room anymore.
Love it. Love it. Hey,
and I'll tell you right now, I was bitching and complaining for like the last 3 or 4 years that it was softening up over at that place. Okay. So he was trying to be a little softer.
Well, look where that got him.
That could be the reason.
Look where that got him. 3 and 10.
What? We need to get harder, Bill. We need it harder.
He's gonna zig. The rest of the league zags. Belichick's running it. All right. Hey, you're the best.
Always.
Congratulations on all your success, man.
Games with Names. Check it out, folks. It's awesome sports history podcast. Awesome players that played in the games from baseball, soccer, football. We got wrestling. We got everything in there to like crazy celebrities that love the games. So it's fun.
I saw your Brandon Marshall Pro Bowl 2012 episode today.
Yeah.
That is, like stuff like that. And you had a Gilbert Arena 60-point game. That stuff is so cool for people who like the granular detail of particular games or particular plays. Remember how long we talked about the 2016 Super Bowl catch? I mean, I talked to like 12 people about that thing because the granular stuff is what people, hey, there's a play. No, tell me everything that happened.
Exactly. And we said Robert Horry talked about that game 5 when he's in San Antonio versus the Detroit Pistons. It's just, it's honestly, we get into the game, but it's also an excuse for us to talk about, awesome legendary careers, with like Reggie Bush, Ricky Williams, Bert Kreischer, the comedian who's a huge Florida State fan. Like, it's just it's a fun podcast. People just having conversations. I've had a blast doing it. And it gives me that kind of fix of locker room talk with, people that I get to share a locker room with.
I absolutely love it. If you need anybody, just let me know. I got a long.
We got to get you on there soon. I
got no memories. I got no memories. I could tell you about my Raynham Athletic Club when I scored 31. Our A player was out. I just kept shooting.
Yeah, we can save that one and do like maybe a Portland Lake Celtics game or something.
I love it. All right, buddy. Have a great week. Thanks again.
You too, Tommy. I'll see you.